Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Just a little bit of post-fight analysis on the UFC last night. Volkanovski versus Korean Zombie. What an amazing card. I'm sitting there with my son watching the fights, and after the Khamzat Chimaev and Gilbert Burns fight was over with, we looked at each other and we're like, can you believe there's still the co-main event and the main event left? We were spent. I was sitting there watching that fight, feeling in the moment like I was watching a fight of the year candidate, and it probably is going to be. I mean, that was an amazing fight between those two guys. I'm not going to say it's as good, but it's one of those that's going to go in the category with, Chandler, Gagey, Connor, Nate. We did finally get to see whether Hamzat is just a hype train or does he actually have skills to back up that hype. Well, we saw a couple of things and a couple of questions were answered. One of those questions was, ah, he's got the skills, and he's not just a hype train. He was able to be successful through adversity. We were able to see him tested last night. He got hit several times by Gilbert, even dropped a couple of times by Gilbert, and he was able to persevere through that, keep going, come back, show the heart of what's probably a future champion. And we saw that in him. But we also saw that he's not Superman. He's not invincible. Up until now, with the challenges that he's faced or challengers that he's faced, he's looked somewhat invincible. Gilbert Burns did what he was supposed to do in this situation. Now, I know Gilbert wanted to win that fight. He did not get the memo about this hype train of Khamzat and that Khamzat was heavily, heavily, heavily favored in this. He came in there to fight and he came in there to win it. Now, he didn't get the win, but it was very closely contested. It was a split decision and it really could have kind of gone either way. But it's one of those that we finally got to see Kamzat tested. We got to see his chin tested. We got to see his toughness tested and what he was going to look like once he finally got hit, once he got rocked. I'm definitely satisfied to see what's next for him. But that was just a great fight, great back and forth fight. Both of those guys having their moments in that fight. At the end of it, I think Hamzat had more moments, more and bigger moments, I think, than did Gilbert. But Gilbert had some of his own, and it was a very, very close fight. And listen, we saw the number 11 guy up against a number 2 guy. Rarely do we see that. Normally a number 11 guy is not going to get a number 2 guy. We did in this situation because there's so much hype behind Chimaev. Now, this is a rarity in the sense that the number 11 guy comes in, beats the number 2 guy. So let me repeat that. The number 11 guy comes in, beats the number 2 guy, but still the number 2 guy's stock went up. Just, it's hard to wrap your brain around that. How is that possible? Normally, a number 11 guy comes in, beats a number 2 guy. Dude, number 2 guy, you just might as well go ahead and retire. I mean, you're number 2 in the world in that division, and the number 11 guy just beat you. Go ahead and retire, dude. Sit down. Go sit down somewhere. This is a rare situation where it was such a good fight. And, Gilbert was the underdog in that fight, and Chimaev was heavily favored. And looking at that fight last night, it's crazy to think that the betting odds were stacked so firmly against Gilbert Burns because Gilbert had his moments. He had his moments in that fight where I thought he could win that, and I think everybody else did too. The fight was a lot closer than what people were thinking it was going to be, and man, that was definitely a fight of the year candidate. Obviously, Kamzat got the win. We got to finally see him get tested and see what he was going to do in those situations where he found himself in a little bit of trouble. Hey, man. I mean, he answered a lot of questions last night. I got to give full credit to him. It's not just hype. He does have skills to back it up. Now, he's not Superman. He's not invincible. Gilbert showed us that last night. But got to give Kamzat credit. He did just go in as the number 11 contender and beat the number 2 contender. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. And that's why they call it the people's main event. What I love about that fight is, in spite of the number 2 guy losing to the number 11 guy, I mean, who's mad at Gilbert Burns? I mean, did he lose one iota of respect from anyone? No, man. No, no. He did not. If anything, his stock has gone up, and everyone's respect for Gilbert, and at least in my court, has gone up. In spite of him losing to the number 11 guy, because he made that a hell of a fight. I was expecting Hamzat to win, but honestly, I did not anticipate that Gilbert was going to be such a challenge for him. He was more of a challenge than I thought. Now, I don't know if you can chalk that up to, well, Gilbert's just that good. Now, you can look at Hamzat and say, can he beat Kamaru? Can he beat Kamaru? I don't know, man. I mean, I know MMA math doesn't work. And I know you can't say, well, he had a hard time with Gilbert and went to a decision, and Kamaru handily finished Gilbert. So obviously, Kamaru's going to beat Kamzat. Yeah, I know you can't say that because MMA math does not work, and it's been proven time and time again. But Gilbert gave him a lot of trouble, and we did see that there are some holes in his game that allowed him to get caught against Gilbert and all that. So, you know, now you look at it and it does make you wonder if we should take a step back a little bit and say, let's not make Hamzat the champion just yet. Kamaru Usman is a very, very tough individual, not just by virtue of his physical skills, but mentally as well. So, hey, man, I mean, I'll be looking forward to that. I hope that with him having beat the number 2 Gilbert Burns, that the title shot will be next for Kamzat. I'm definitely ready to see that. But it makes it more interesting and more intriguing because now seeing how that fight played out between him and Gilbert, I can now look at that and say, I can see how Kamaru could beat him. I can see how Kamzat can be beat or could be beat. Because prior to this, we haven't really seen it. Now, the guy's undefeated. So a lot of questions got answered in that fight last night. And that is why, my friends, that was called the people's main event because it felt like the main event. All right, spinning it forward, Aljamain Sterling doing what he said he was going to do the whole time, shocking the world, showing the world that that first fight was somewhat of a fluke on his part, that he was dealing with a neck injury, that Piotr Jan was the best of himself on that night, and he fought the worst of Aljamain Sterling. Man, I just got to say that I got to give Aljamain Sterling a lot of credit. Now, obviously, I'm an American. I pull for the American. I have a lot of, pride in my home country. So I was wanting Aljo to win that fight. I was pulling for Aljo. But, I make picks on here and I make predictions on here based on technical prowess and who I think is going to get it done inside the octagon, not who I want to get it done inside the octagon. Based on their first fight, I didn't have a choice but to pick Piotr Jan. Piotr Jan dominated except for the first round of that first fight. He completely dominated Aljamain Sterling in that first fight. And based on that fight, I had to go on that. So I picked Piotr Jan to win this fight, hands down. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that Aljamain Sterling came in, had a really good game plan. He used that grappling heavy back control of his to dominate a lot of that fight on the ground. Granted, he wasn't able to really come too close with any submissions or anything like that, but he had a lot of ground control time over Piotr Jan, which I think at the end of the day is what ended up getting him that win. And it was good to see for Aljamain Sterling because I think this whole disqualification thing by and I know in social media especially he kind of leaned into it and made it a part of his whole gimmick and everything, and I think that was smart for him to do that. Kind of made fun of the whole situation. He's got the UFC rule book and is doing all these skits with his training partners on kneeing a downed opponent and this and that. So he did a good job from a publicity perspective of just kind of leaning into that situation. But listen, man, don't let it fool you. Aljamain Sterling was devastated emotionally by the way all of that went down. He did not want to win that belt, nor does any competitor, by disqualification. He doesn't want to be handed that belt because somebody else made a mistake in the octagon. He wanted to win that fight legitimately based on his skills, based on the rules of the octagon and in MMA and the UFC and all of those things. He wanted to get that belt legitimately. Well, he did that last night, and I couldn't be happier for that guy, man. We got an American champion back in there, so I'm feeling pretty proud about that. These Russian guys are just have been dominating. I mean, you have Islam Makhachev down there. We already talked about Khamzat, and his win over Gilbert Burns. So it's nice to have an American up in the mix, kind of sitting firmly. Well, I'm not going to say too firmly because he definitely did not dominate Piotr Jan. And Piotr Jan, came back and won that fifth round, and it had me a little bit concerned, if I'm being honest with you. I felt like that fight kind of could have gone either way, and I think it's the ground control time of Aljamain Sterling that ended up giving him that victory. I don't think that Piotr Jan is going to be staying out of the title picture for too long. In fact, I would not be surprised if spinning it forward, they throw him right back in there. I love fights like that, ones that are back and forth and ones that you look at the end and you go, this could kind of go either way, couldn't it? Who's going to win? Who's going to win? And that's what we saw in the Khamzat Gilbert fight and also the Aljo Piotr Jan fight. So, however, we did not see that, did we? In the main event between Alexander Volkanovski and Korean Zombie. Listen, Korean Zombie, they call him Zombie for a reason. And we saw it last night when Herb Dean finally just stepped in and waved off that fight. He felt like Zombie had had enough and that he needed to save Zombie from himself. They do call Zombie Zombie for a reason, and that has, to me, negative connotation and positive connotation. The negative part of that is, and I said this before the fight in my pre-fight analysis, Zombie does not move his head. Zombie does not have lateral movement, in and out movement, doesn't have head movement. He comes in much like a zombie would, just straightforward, plodding forward, walking you down much like a zombie would, not moving his head, just he's there to be hit. And I knew that against a very fast, technical fighter and a guy with excellent footwork and movement like Alexander Volkanovski, that was going to lead to trouble for the Korean Zombie, and it did. He was at a major speed disadvantage. You saw immediately who the much faster opponent was in that fight. That was easily Volkanovski. Korean Zombie was just having trouble touching him at all. I mean, he had a couple of moments where he landed some decent shots, but the tell of that fight was the speed of Volkanovski, the movement, the lateral movement. He's landing that leg kick, that hard leg kick, good body kick. And then he comes in, he lands that one, and then that overhand two. He landed that flush numerous times last night. And I mean, you have to give Korean Zombie credit for being able to stay in that fight as long as he did. He was busted up, man. Korean Zombie was taking a lot of punishment. And hey, you know, I felt bad for him because after the fight, it seemed like he was indicating, possibly retiring, stuff like that. I know he's 35 years old. He's not necessarily a spring chicken anymore, but hey, you know, you don't go in and go up against a guy who is as dominant of a champion as Alexander Volkanovski, who's now what, 24 and 1? 24 and 1 and no signs of slowing down. And the only guy who's really given him any trouble at all, besides the brief moments he had in the Ortega fight, with almost getting choked and then the triangle choke, has been Max Holloway. And Max Holloway is one of the GOATs, for sure, one of the GOATs. So, Alexander Volkanovski is not the kind of guy that you go in and lose to him and say, well, I'm just going to retire. Forget it. I ain't worth a damn anymore. No, no, man. I know in that moment he was probably feeling kind of emotional and he had just taken a major beating. I hope that as he starts to spin it forward in his own mind where he sees himself in the future, hey, don't be so hard on yourself. That was Alexander Volkanovski, and he is quickly, very quickly making a case for himself as being one of the best ever, if not the best ever in that division. Well, he's already in the conversations, but he's not that guy yet where we can say, oh yeah, yeah, greatest of all time, pound for pound, right there, that guy. It's just a little bit too early, a little too premature, but he's in those talks, man. I would say within the next year or two. If he keeps doing what he's doing, then we're not going to be able to deny the GOAT status of Alexander Volkanovski. So, as far as how that relates to Korean Zombie, it wasn't even supposed to be you. It was supposed to be Max Holloway for a third time. So it was a big jump for him to go in there and face the top guy in the world. And you could see the difference in their skill levels. And it was one of those things where, to be quite honest, Zombie probably shouldn't even have been in there with him. Can I just be honest here? He's just not good enough. And let's keep it real. And I have a ton of respect for Zombie, and he's been in some very, very fun fights. I mean, the fight with him and Yair Rodriguez, that for me is one of the greatest fights in UFC history. So he did the best he could in there against the number one guy in the world. And I don't think it's anything to retire over, if I'm being honest. But man, great set of fights last night. Go back and watch those, especially the Chimaev Gilbert Burns one. That was a war for the ages, man. What a fun fight. But a lot of questions got answered in that fight. A lot of questions got answered in the Aljamain fight. And we finally got an American back in there as a champion. So appreciate you guys watching. Hey, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the bell so you can get notifications of when I post a video. All right. All right. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.